Major sponsors for Ableton On Air include Washington County Mental Health, where hope and support come together. Media sponsors for Ableton On Air include Parkchester Times, Muslim Community Report, www.thisisthebronx.info, Associated Press Media Editors, New York Parrot Online Newspaper, U.S. Press Corps Domestic and International, Anchor FM, and Spotify. Partners for Ableton On Air include Yachad of New York and New England, where everyone belongs, the Orthodox Union, the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired of Vermont, the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, Central Vermont Habitat for Humanity, Montefiore Medical Center of the Bronx, Rose F. Kennedy Center of Bronx, New York, Albert Einstein College of Medicine of the Bronx. Ableton On Air has been seen in the following publications: Parkchester Times, www.thisisthebronx.com, New York Parrot Online Newspaper, Muslim Community Report, www.h.com, and the Montpelier Bridge. Ableton On Air is part of the following organizations: the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, Boston, New England chapter, and the Society of Professional Journalists. Coming up on this edition of Special People, Special Issues, what does it mean for people that are differently abled to have proper housing? With me to discuss this topic is Gregory D. Bell, Sr. Coming up next.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Welcome to this edition of Special People, Special Issues, the one and only program that focuses on the needs, concerns, and achievements of the differently abled. I'm your host, Lawrence Seiler. On this edition, we'll focus on housing for the differently abled. With me to discuss this important topic is Gregory D. Bell, Sr. of Insight for New Housing, an organization that focuses on housing for people that are visually impaired and also blind. Greg?
Hi,
Welcome
Lawrence.
to Special People, Special Issues.
My pleasure to be here.
Okay. Explain the missions and goals. I know you've been on the show before. Explain the missions and goals of Insight for New Housing.
Well, there are primarily three goals. The first is develop housing for people with special needs, for people in the disability community, with a primary focus on the visually impaired. Mm-hmm. The second is to improve the quality of life and lifestyle for individuals that are living with disabilities, and the third is to be an information and referral source, a quality information and referral source that deals with the issues for a person with disabilities.
Can you explain a little bit about your story? I understand that you're a former Vietnam veteran who lost your sight, but has persevered and basically helped others to persevere. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that everybody that's at least over the age of 25 has gone through some challenges in their life once they left the cocoon of their family. Being a combat Vietnam vet, I had my own issues, back in the late 60s, early 70s. Unfortunately, I was forced into a homeless situation only to find out that the city of New York didn't have a sheltered environment for persons with disabilities, and that the veterans didn't have one either. I felt somewhat put upon. So I decided and determined to turn myself to get into the housing development field so that persons that are visually impaired and combat vets and veterans in general wouldn't have to deal with that issue. I was going to address the need because I thought that what happened to me wasn't an isolated situation.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain a little bit more about your buildings and your housing developments and how they work for people with disabilities?
Well, deciding to become a developer is a process that I went through in terms of learning what a nonprofit 501c3 was about, and then learning how to deal with development from the developer's perspective, having been a tenants advocate in learning how to deal with the protections of a tenant from the tenants advocate side at Bed-Stuy Legal Services under Mr. Carl Callender, who was a previous commissioner of Section 8. Mm-hmm. And some of the things I've learned is that you just don't develop a building. You have to deal with the development of the community, especially if you're dealing with the differently abled community, because you don't want to have a situation where persons become vulnerable to whatever negative elements might be within the community. So to that regard, I was asked to become a partner with Highbridge HCDC. And the first two buildings that were developed in Bronx County that deal with persons with disabilities and have been helped along by an individual that's visually impaired are Jessup 1 at 1510 Jessup Avenue, mm-hmm. and Jessup 2, right adjacent to it. Those buildings were designed by myself. The footprint was made by an architect, and sitting down and discussing with him what needed to be done was an interesting prospect. It took approximately 4.5 years for those buildings to come online, and while that was being done, I sat in the Housing and Land Use Committee of Planning Board 4, and I was recording secretary for Economic Development of Planning Board 4, along with being involved with the Borough President's Disability Advisory Council. Mm-hmm. Having all those community involvements helped me to understand what the community's needs were, and being a part of the Disability Network of New York City and the Disability Advocacy Network of New York State helped me to hear the priorities and concerns from the disability community perspective. And knowing that the city now supports universal design that originated at the University of North Carolina, and the fact that it accommodates individuals with disabilities so that buildings that are designed within that format accommodate all persons with disabilities, and they don't have to refit apartments because they're all designed in such a way that they accommodate us.
How did Insight for New Housing come about? I know it's a brainchild of yours, but can you explain how it came about in your mind and the other people working with you?
Well, as I said, being homeless myself and having to basically start my life all over again and find a place to reside, a comfortable shelter, I first realized that there is no such thing as quality, affordable housing. Mm-hmm. The federal government, the state, and the city haven't come to resolution to have one universal definition that accommodates people with disabilities. Okay. A person with disability might have worked during the course of their life and be able to be on SSDI. But if they don't, then they're on SSI. So knowing that you're only getting $700+ a month, 30% of that is not going to get you housing. So you're going to need a subsidy. Section 8 doesn't exist anymore. So looking at what the needs were and looking at the fact that if the building's going to be built and you're going to put persons with disabilities in it, then it should either have project-based subsidies that are available out there or be able to invite persons with disabilities that happen to have the income necessary to be able to sustain themselves. They should be invited in. So when I came to Highbridge HCDC and designed a marketing plan that would reach out to the disability community, first they were skeptical, and now they appreciate what I did.
Why? Okay, let me ask you this question, because I asked this of all my guests. The missions, what are the misconceptions about people with disabilities when you first meet them or when people first meet them?
I'll give you my take on what I believe it to be, because what I haven't mentioned is that I sit on the New York State Rehabilitation Council Subcommittee on Workforce Development. One of the prejudices or the quiet discrimination points that you find, within the context of the disability community is that employers believe that they want to hire people that are like themselves. Fully able, differently able is not something that they want to ascribe to. They think about insurance rates going up. They think about the person not being able to come to work every day, when exactly the opposite is true. Persons with disabilities are dedicated to the jobs that they have, and they basically adopt them as a part of their life, not just a lifestyle change. So they become very engrossed in their work. Their skill level tends to be one that doesn't fluctuate. If they are task-oriented to do a particular job, the job gets done. Vested has several different situations where they have supportive work, and you can have an individual help to train on the job at no cost to the employer. I mean, all the things that you would think that a person with disabilities is unable to do, technology and assistance from outside sources has made that person competitive in the job market. It's getting through the HR representatives and the screening processes that inhibits an individual from obtaining a job.
Now, in terms of employment and housing together, okay, I understand that there is the ADA, and then there's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and so on and so forth. Are there any housing laws that say that housing needs to be accessible? I know that there's 504. Can you explain a little bit about
Well,
that?
let's go to New York State and some regulations, because there is a rule that says if you take any type of government subsidy, that you have to comply with certain rules. And there's the rules called the 5-2-2 rule. And a lot of individuals with disabilities are unaware of this. And when they're told that there's a 5-year waiting list, they believe that that's actually the case, and it's not necessarily so. It could be, but it's not necessarily so. See, the 5-2-2 rule says that 5% of that housing should be available for persons with disabilities. Blanket, 5% should be available to persons with disabilities. 2% is supposed to be available for people that are visually impaired, and another 2% for people that are hearing impaired. So the question is, when you call up a real estate agent, a project manager, and you're inquiring about an apartment, you ask them, are you in compliance with the 5-2-2 rule, since you receive government funds in order to develop your property? And they should have the answer for you. And if they tell you about a waiting list, say, well, how long is the waiting list for persons with disabilities for you to be in compliance? Because if they're not in compliance, the very next apartment that becomes available should be given to a qualified applicant with a disability. And the qualified applicant is the part that people with disabilities need to understand, to keep ourselves in a way that we become financially literate, so that we can understand that when an apartment becomes available, that we are responsible. And that's another thing. You don't go to family court and see people with disabilities having to deal with notices of eviction or petitions to the court because they haven't paid their rent. They're very responsible individuals. So whether you're talking about living in an apartment or you're talking about a job, they are an attribute in the community that needs to be appreciated. And that's what Insight for New Housing desires to do, is level the playing field, bring into sensitivity those individuals that are living in the community and those merchants and businesses that are within the community.
Why is it extremely important, though, to have housing? Because, there's a lot of homelessness here in the United States as well as New York. Why is it important to have housing for people with disabilities?
I consider housing, whether you're in a co-op or your own home or an apartment, you're able to express who you are. The colors that you use, the pictures that are up, how you decorate your apartment is extremely personal. It's how you express your likes and dislikes, the music that you have, the videos, or whatever else that you have in there, the way that you can invite people in or invite people out, the way that you can participate in your community and the electoral process. I mean, we have an impact on what communities are all about, but we don't have the community understand they also impact us. so that when you don't have a place to live and you begin to be homeless, you think less of yourself. Your self-esteem goes down. Negative things can happen to your psyche. There are a lot of agencies in New York City that deal with independent living, that deal with how you care for yourself. They have counseling sessions for what you think about. They want to get into your head and know what it is that you think about. Mm-hmm. Insight for New Housing wants to create communities. So those things that are on your mind, those ways that you express yourself, and the fact that you should have an impact on your community becomes evident, such as a community calendar that speaks so you can hear activities, so you can participate or have the choice to participate in your life in whichever way you choose. To ask elected officials to communicate not just in Braille and large print, but through the medium that you feel most comfortable with, since they're supposed to comply with the ADA also. Recently, Speaker Quinn of the City Council has stated that she wants to create a data bank of resources that is going to be available to New York City residents, that is going to be a listing of affordable, quality housing, and it's going to be inclusive of persons with disabilities. These are some of the things that persons with disabilities need to pay attention to.
Okay. Excuse me when we go to break. When we come back, more on Insight for New Housing when we return in a moment. Stay tuned.
There's a principle in economics called the multiplier theory, and it talks about how many of the dollars that are initially spent by BronxNet, and that is how much of the budget of BronxNet, goes out into the community and gets respent and impacts the community as a whole. That number at BronxNet is about 3 times the budget of BronxNet. There's also a more important plus factor in terms of economic development. And many of the shows that exist in BronxNet about health, about culture, about jobs, discussions about new retail clusters, they cause residents of the Bronx to go to those organizations. They cause residents of the Bronx to spend money at those organizations. They cause people in the Bronx to be employed by those organizations. In addition to that, BronxNet trains a tremendous amount of people, 17,000 interns over the last 10 years or so, another 4,000 people in its training program over the last 6 years, and dozens of former BronxNet interns at ABC, CBS, NBC, and other organizations like that.
Voice your support to keep the channels open and strong. Online, visit bronxnet.org and click on Support Public Access Television and sign the letter to your local representatives.
Our voices will be heard. Let's keep the channel open and stay Bronx strong.
weight loss, it's one of the many ways to fight osteoarthritis pain. For more information on managing pain, go to fightarthritispain.org.
Welcome back to Special People, Special Issues, the one and only program that focuses on the needs, concerns, and achievements of the differently able. I'm Lawrence Seiler, and I'm welcoming back Gregory D. Bell, Sr. of Insight for New Housing. Welcome back, Greg, to the show.
Thank you again.
Okay. During our last segment, you spoke about Insight for New Housing. Now, and your organization and your goals and everything. Explain the future goals, really, of Insight for New Housing and going forward and planning and everything of that nature.
Well, as you know, Larry, last year, Insight for New Housing did the first ever Community Disability Day, which informed and showed and displayed individuals with disabilities at high performance rates and their skills at what they do. It also invited approximately 12 different agencies that had never networked together to be able to communicate. Some of them didn't even know that they existed. Well, this year we're planning a hopefully bigger and better Community Disability Day, one that focuses in on housing and health, because we hear about diabetes in the youth community and the obesity problem. But what is not spoken on is the fact that diabetes carries some consequences. There is the possibility of diabetic retinopathy. And I'm concerned because I don't hear anybody talking about the number of youth that could be losing some of their eyesight. And as an advocate in the blind community, that is something that is on the top of my radar screen. Not to mention the fact that I do want to be able to see more housing developed using green technology and hopefully developing jobs that individuals with disabilities, all disabilities, can be able to live in and work in with a sustainable income so that they can participate in the new housing that's being developed all over Bronx County, because there's very little land yet, that is available. See, one thing that I've learned being on the Housing and Land Use Committee is that there's a relationship between housing and land use and economic development. Developers have to have community space in the buildings that are government funded. But the problem is you have all this community space and no funds available to do the programming necessary to keep the kids off the street, exercising, education, and the things that they need to do in order to have a good quality of life. And when you're a parent and you happen to have a disability, or you're the parent of a child with a disability, you want to make sure that child gets good education, good exercise, and keeps in good health. My concern also goes around the fact that there are several schools here in the Bronx, the Lavelle School for the Blind, the Institute for Special Education, that might possibly have a negative situation that they have to deal with because of the austerity budget cuts. All of these things are things that Insight for New Housing is interested in as we deal with the total living environment and leveling the playing field so that all persons with disabilities can be able to participate with a quality of life that is healthy and lives out the American dream.
Okay, you mentioned the American dream just now. The American dream years ago used to be white picket fence, house, dog, wife. But why? I mean, housing has changed, from the slums, from homelessness to ghettos and so on. Explain how your housing developments are different than regular housing, or shall we say, quote unquote, regular housing developments, or what's the differences between your housing developments and others?
Insight for New Housing, in its joint venture with Highbridge HCDC, also has a consultant contract to develop programs that interest the individuals that are living. There's a social contract that the development has with Planning Board 4 and its community that says 25% of that housing will be for persons with disabilities and people that are visually impaired. Now, having a relationship with Visions and with the Lighthouse and being on the board of directors of the Hope of Israel Senior Center, we're able to do some things that you might not find with other housing. Partnering with Mr. Sean Bell and his development corporation to be able to do an introduction to computers, a health and wellness workshop. Those are other things that Insight involves itself in and makes developers, or brings to the table the types of things that developers can do that will interest their residents to improve their quality of life. It's not just build a building, put people in it, and then wait to be able to receive the money to pay off the mortgage or whatever the relationship might be to the oil companies and the electric company and so forth. It's kind of checking to make sure that the other attributes that the person needs are available to them at their choosing. So you don't intrude with their life, but they can live independently. Now I'm starting to get involved with supportive housing environments and grandparent housing environments to be able to do those things that people would like to see done, can't find a way to make it happen, and developers are also looking for the funding and then a venue that be able to supply those needs.
How does your housing development help the abled and differently abled community going forward and now?
There's a friend of mine that's in ministry, and this individual always says, if you knew better, you'd do better. Most people do not have a relationship with people with disabilities, and most people go into their apartment nowadays and they don't know their neighbors. Mm-hmm. Insight for New Housing seeks to tear down those walls and remove those prejudices so that people do know their neighbors, so they can relate and communicate, so they do understand that they are their brother's keeper. Mm-hmm. So Insight for New Housing going forward is going to attempt to do some things that other social agencies are doing, and doing well, by the way, and just try to assist them so that it includes the disability community. So we're not trying to knock what everybody else is doing, but try to tweak it, add to it, not reinvent the wheel, but say, here's a building. This building is specifically designed so that people with visual impairment who have not been included in previous building designs are now included. Not just Braille elevators, not elevators that just go bing, bing, bing as they go by, but elevators that talk. Not just having a door that has 4M on it, but a door that has 4M in Braille. Mm-hmm. And then in a large print where you can feel it, so that if you don't read Braille, you'll still know where you're located. Changing the texture of the floors so that they can move from one place to the next and use that change in texture to be able to get in areas where they might not have recognized they were in before. Less chances of getting lost in a building if they're visually impaired. If they're in a wheelchair, making sure that the doors are wide enough and comfortable enough, and creating intergenerational programs. There is so much that every community can do to invite the disabled or differently able community into social environments.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you for joining me on this edition of Special People, Special Issues. When we come back, we'll have the Special People, Special Issues bulletin board. When we return in a moment, stay tuned.
It's very vital that the community be involved with these types of productions.
It introduced me to the operations of camera, about field production.
It was like an extended version of going back to school for me.
I think BronxNet brought it out of me.
BronxNet is a very good source for the regular citizen to just have that opportunity.
It's for the community, to be utilized by the community.
To present their side, their story through communications and through the television medium.
Voice your support to keep the channels open and strong. Online, visit BronxNet.org and click on Support Public Access Television and sign the letter to your local representatives.
Our voices will be heard. Let's keep the channel open and stay strong.
Weight loss, it's one of the many ways to fight osteoarthritis pain. For more information on managing pain, go to fightarthritispain.org.
Welcome back to Special People, Special Issues. Now let's take a look at the Special People, Special Issues Bulletin Board. It contains numbers of the organization featured on today's program. For more information on Insight for New Housing, please contact Gregory D. Bell Sr. at 347-590-1080. That number again is 347-590-1080. And the website is www.insightfornewhousing.org. Well, that puts an end to this edition of Special People, Special Issues. I'm Lawrence Seiler. See you next time.